I'm misinformed sometimes without studying. The Haitians, first of all, were geniuses, especially on a structural level. They were after the Haitian Revolution. They were making so much money with sugarcane, cotton, and I think it was another it was some type of bean. They were making so much money, and they were trading with a couple of countries that at the same time it was still chattel slavery in the United States of America. And Thomas Jefferson became the president. Right before the Louisiana Purchase, Thomas Jefferson understood, along with his conglomerate, they understood that what the Haitians was doing was so powerful because they was developing a kingdom. The Haitians built the citadel, Queen Irene, with no European involvement. Look up Citadel. That's a
But
castle
Haiti,
built
but
on a mountain.
Haiti, but Haiti is fallen. So
So I'm gonna tell you why. I'm gonna tell you why. Queen Irene. This is why they failed. Thomas Jefferson enacted trade embargoes on any country that was doing business with Haiti. So they economically undermined Haiti. They stopped them from being able
yes.
to make make money.
Okay,
That's why.
that is just what I that's exactly what I was saying though, is that they did not know, and this is what the movement behind the Petro Caribe deal was, but then Haiti's government is so corrupt they still couldn't take advantage of it, is that they didn't know how to function outside of the reach of the European arm. They didn't. That's why they fell. Now, Cuba, Venezuela, Russia, and a couple of other countries, along with Haiti, recently tried to function outside of the European arm. That meant cutting down the central banks. That meant not doing trade with European countries at all, with the exception of Russia, and only doing trade amongst themselves, which is why we're trying to overthrow all these countries and cause coups and things like that. But that is the part that I'm talking about, is the thing that nobody has mastered, no Black people that have liberated themselves have mastered, is what was attempted through Petro Caribe, which is knowing how to function on this earth when most of the earth is westernized. Most of the earth has a European arm attached to it. Nobody has figured that out. So the revolution is one thing, but being able to function and trade, because we're in a global society, being able to do all that, although Haiti's situation is unique too, because they did not have the climate to be self-sustaining. Trade was necessary for them to sustain themselves. So doing that without being able to be cut off by Europe, because they're not the only ones Europe cut off. There are several African countries too that the Europeans simply cut off once they liberated themselves. So this is how the ball rolls.
Yes, you're right, Queen. You're right, Queen. You're right. I want to make a statement, but you're right.
So here's what I was going to say, not regarding Haiti or anything like that, regarding your point about assimilation. What conversation are we having? A or B. Here's the sad reality. A lot of those people are, like, again, going to the title of this panel, they're disillusioned. They're actually thinking that they're actually radical. You know what I mean? But they're really, under this assimilation framework. You know what I mean? You're still under the eyes. You're still under the power and the prowess of your great white master. And so you think that you're actually doing something. I told them that, they need to do something more about this. We need to get these arenas open so these people come and vote. I told them, I'm like, okay, you really think that's moving the needle? And so the sad reality is that you raise a good point, but a lot of people can't see that those two things are bifurcated. They see it as symbiotic, like, oh, no, I am being radical. I got this white person to do this. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I got them to do that. Okay. So that's where we are right now. And we can't have it like that. We have to be unapologetic in the ways we're moving. We have to depend on us to do the things that need to be done for us. And that's not where it is. Because again, this xenophilic notion that we have, the xenophilic orientation that, hey, everybody can come on in, all lives matter, kumbaya, you could be any which way, as long as you have a Black Lives Matter sign, it's okay, and you're down for the cause. And really, but none of them have heard about interest convergence, right? None of them have heard about the only reason why these white folks are doing this is for their own bottom line, that it looks good politically, right? And they're making money on the back ends because you're still ultimately the commodity that they're using to make their billions. And so no one's having that real conversation. And so these young brothers and everything that are supposed to be quote unquote woke, right? And really being social justice advocates, and I'm like, brother, that's not it. And then you get upset when these white folks do what they're naturally going to do what's in their best interest, and then you start claiming foul. Really? They're doing what's organic to them. We're the people not doing what's organic to us and in our best interest. And that's the sad thing. So when you bring up a good point, Irene, when you're talking about we're having two conversations, but for some of us, it's not two conversations. It's one, because they can see it as such.
Big facts. And I just want to interject this because that's very true. And I see the dichotomy with the two conversations. I see it in real life and I see it in social media. But I've already identified what the problem is, and I just use history and I use our scholars. There's a group of Black people, melanated people, who believe that technology and quote unquote civilization has been developed and from Europeans, and you need a European to sustain it. That's the first problem right there. That's one of the main problems right there, because that's completely false. Even down to electronics or electricity, period. That's completely false. A European did not develop or present to the human race how to manipulate electronics or electricity or none of that. So, and that's just one level. But we have a certain sector of our people that believe that you need Europeans to quote unquote be civilized and to have technology. That's the first problem. The second problem is another group of our people who are quote unquote conscious or aware are not a conglomerate, meaning we're not organized enough to implement a fight. Now, when I say a fight, I do not see, we speak in revolution and we're using the paradigm of the 60s and the 70s. If you read Neely Fuller's United Independent Compensatory Concept for Victims of Racism, and this is scientific. We do not need to be acting in a revolutionary manner with a bunch of us invading some quote unquote government building or nothing like that. We have to be independent, and the only thing that connects us is a code. That code is the United Independent Compensatory Code, which is we are dedicated to justice. So with that being said, 50 or 100 Black people with guns don't need to be trying to storm down on identified white supremacist organization. That's suicide. We have to be acting independent, meaning me, you, all of us on this panel who are dedicated to justice and seeing justice for our people, because we're under terrorism. We have to be acting independently. So if we have to eliminate race soldiers that we have identified that are terrorizing our people under impunity, then we have to do that independently, like Micah Johnson did, or like Christopher Dorner did, or like Gavin Long did. That's what has to happen. We can't be trying to group with each other and have a leader because they kill leaders. And once a leader falls, then everything else is done. But they can't kill an idea. And when you study history and you study any population of people who were terrorized by Europeans, those who ran them off, like I'm gonna use those in the Middle East, for example. When the Europeans came in, who the Europeans in this country came in to get their oil, right? They created propaganda. They sent in economic hitmen, because that's how they do it first. You get the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. It was laid out. They come in with a military, and then they come in with military contractors, which are private, who operate outside of what the UN war treaty is, and they murder, rape, and terrorize these people. Now, what the people in the Middle East did, specifically Afghanistan and Iraq, they were so terrorized that they galvanized under their quote unquote religion, and they learned what they were taught, actually, but they mechanized and weaponized explosives, and they went to the extreme. They put bombs on themselves and blew everybody up, because that's a people who their back was so against the wall that it was all or nothing. Just like the kamikaze in Japan. The kamikaze in Japan, Europeans were subjugating them after the opium wars, and they said, okay, well, F this. We're going to get in these planes. We know we're outnumbered, outgunned. We're going to get in these planes, and we're just going to fly the planes into their boats. Suicide missions. But it's all or nothing, because they understood that you have to be engaged in that, and they did it independently. Nobody knew that Pearl Harbor was going to happen the way it happened. Nobody knew that individual Japanese planes were going to be flying into boats and blowing them up. They had no idea, because they was independently acting. Nobody knew that these quote unquote terrorist organizations were going to be strapping bombs to themselves with C4, RDX, and Semtex and blowing things up, because they didn't group themselves together and say, we're going to do this. They was acting independently, and their code was their religion, but they had a code. If we don't do that, we're going to continue to be terrorized. It's not going to stop. They're ramping it. They are steadfast in their terrorism against us. They're not going to stop. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, I agree. And circling back around to just this delusion that we're in, and the illness that is our illusion of progress, I think we really have to start living in reality. And, I think so many of our people, I don't know what they're reaching for. I'm confused as to
Irene, that's going to be hard. Just to cut you off, that's going to be hard when you say we need to start living in reality. Five, you know what I mean by this, because Dr. Emmett Wilson always said that, and it's so true, that everything's turned upside down. You know what I mean? And so when we tell our brothers and sisters endearingly, like with love, hey, this is not where it is. We actually should be doing B instead of C. Especially if it's against whom they consider their master, right? Who they consider to be the highest of the high, the fatherly, this paternalistic figure. You can't say anything against them, right? Especially when they're waving they fans and has the white Christ on it and everything. What can you say to those folks, because they're so disillusioned that? And again, it's kind of like what Five said earlier. I mean, come to a point, do we have to start offing some of them? Because I agree, I want some answers because I don't know, because I know we have to get out of this illusion, but some of us think that it's actually reality. And we're telling them like, no, that's not it. It's like this matrix, right? They're like, no, everything is good. It's like, no, bro, it's really not. Sister's not. And again, if you tell them something counter to, especially older ones, right? Especially, older of our brothers and sisters. I think the younger ones, again, that's why we talked about the education earlier, and to my point, let's not try to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I think we can save some of those babies, right? Because we have less, unlearning, they have less unlearning to do within them. But their parents and everything, it may be too far gone for them, right? Because again, their reality is this illusion, right? And so again, I'm throwing it out to anybody on the panel. How do we kind of do that? I mean, it circles back to my original question, because we are in this situation where people think that up is down and right is left, and it's just a mess.
Yeah.
Great point.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying that was a great point. I was waiting for anyone else on the panel to chime in. That's a great point, though. I mean, I have something I want to chime in, but I want to hear our other people on the channel, on the panel.
Dark, what are you doing?
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
Wait, just give me like 2 minutes.
Okay.
No problem, brother. No problem, brother. Dog. Yeah. Okay. Let me just say one thing, real quick. And everything you said, brother, Mister was on point, and it's a huge topic of frustration for us. But again, when you operate in brass tacks, which is just basically cut and dry, basically mathematics, we got to use 1 + 1 = 2. So those of our people who are, they're programmed on a subconscious level to a point where, they're not operating in reality. And there's a lot of our people that are operating like that. We cannot, it's nothing we can say to them, brother, mister. If we can't kidnap them, so to speak, and reprogram their subconscious mind, because the problem is in their subconscious. The problem is not what we can say to them or what book we can give to them, or even if they see one of their offspring murdered. The problem is in their subconscious mind. That's the problem. So if we can't reprogram it with trauma or music and repetition or symbolism, then it's nothing we can do. They're basically in the way.
And it's sad, brother, as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about it, because there's been this motif, right? There's been this reoccurrence, for several years, right? Even hundreds of years of us being targets, right? Us being lynched, us being shot, us, all these types of atrocities that have been waged on our bodies, right? We've always been this collateral damage, right? You know what I mean? We've always been that part of this equation where our dead bodies start this conversation. But notice it's just a conversation that doesn't go anywhere, because again, we keep falling for the banana in the tailpipe. And again, listen to you, it's just like, man, we have been, we've been programmed, but we've been programmed to do the same song and dance over and over and over again. I'm listening again, I'm not taking, I just don't want to, take ad homs at, the brothers or the sisters of the WNBA or any sports organization for that matter. But again, we really believe that just kneeling, during the flag, during the Pledge of Allegiance, we really think that we have these sayings. We really think if we cover a street with Black Lives Matters and signs are everywhere, and now people are singing Kumbaya, and all this white guilt money is going, around like wildfire, and that it's a new time, we're making movements. People really do believe that, and I'm just like, wow. But like you said, they're not looking at the history. What has happened
They're
over
just
and over again.
not to cut you off, brother. It's
Go ahead,
just
bro.
they're just they're just perpetual children. In the 1700s, brother, I read a slave narrative from a slave narrative, which is a journal from a slave from the 1700s. He was quoting his slave owner. I believe his slave owner probably heard it from another more successful slave owner. Maybe it might be Willie Lynch. Who knows if he even existed? But what he said was paramount. When I heard Bobby Hemmett say it, and then I Googled it and I couldn't find it. But I went on DuckDuckGo and I found it. What they said was, but the slave was a Louisiana slave owner. He said, let us make a slave. To make a slave is to make a perpetual child. That's what he said. That was I read it 6 or 7 years ago. That was so paramount for me because we see it in everyday life with our people. They are perpetual children. Anytime you are kneeling and you're under terrorism, that's a child. Okay. Anytime you're talking about voting for people that you don't even know, people that someone else presented in front of you, that's a child. That's that's the mind of an individual who is looking for a parent to bring them a solution. Our people are perpetual children by and large.
I've returned, by the way. Just putting that out there. Wait, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, brother Doc.
Go ahead, brother.
Okay.
So our people are perpetual children. I mean, this can't even be argued. Look at how we're operating under terrorism. This is sheer terrorism. I mean, they're killing children. I mean, Tamir Rice got killed under the Obama administration. That's a 12-year-old black child with a toy gun. He was gunned down by a race soldier in broad daylight, and our people, they had no response other than kneeling, asking why, or some type of emotion. That's a child. Our people are perpetual children. Majority of us.
Well, might I have the floor for a second?
Yes, sir. We listen, brother.
Okay. I wanted to make a little bit of a note on the on what we were talking about earlier. Well, what Irene was talking about earlier about the two questions: do you want assimilation, or do you want revolution? So what I think is going on, I don't know what to refer to it as, so I'm just going to call it as I'm just going to call it the black id or something like that, because I'm really iffy on I'm really iffy on saying that all black people have a like a unified mind and all black people think a certain type of way. So I'm really hesitant to say black people think X, but just going off of the generalization of, you know, what we know the black community to be, let's just assume that that's what I'm talking about. So what I've seen is that black people want to keep their identity, but they also want the benefits of white society. So they want to have they basically want to have the true representation of separate but equal. And I think there's a few things that play into that. I was talking to one of my friends earlier, and he said something that was that I thought was really funny. And I'm not sure if he was joking or if it was something that he actually thinks. But me and him were making a bit of a skit, right? So I was talking to him as if I was like some slave owner from like the 1800s. You know, like Django, that scene where you remember the scene from Django where where they're riding on, like where the white KKK members were riding on Django and the doctor. Yeah, we were basically doing something like that. And he said something that I thought was kind of funny. He said the white man treats the black woman better and the black man can't compete. And I thought, and I'm pretty sure that that was a joke, but I thought that that was something that was kind of telling. Because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the idolization of whiteness. So I think that there's both an idolization of whiteness, a subconscious idolization of whiteness, and a sort of envy of that whiteness whenever the individual black person doesn't quote unquote measure up to that. So there's sort of lashing out at the perception of whiteness being a greater thing. So essentially, the issue that I see is I think that the people that protest, quote, they want to be white. They want to have the life of whiteness, but they're strapping their inability to have a quote unquote white life. They're strapping that onto the idea that they're black. So I think that there's two different conversations to have that diverge from the two questions.
It's
Wait,
the same.
you asking me something?
I apologize. It's the same conversation, brother, but you're hitting on all cylinders. You're right. It's the same conversation, though. Black people or melanated people in America are operating with a European mind, by and large. If European software, and that's how they operate. Think of the mind like a computer. They're operating from a European software in the body of a melanated person or African. So they are in conflict. So everything they do is going to be basically ass backwards.
Well, yeah, because you can't have. Okay, I'll say it like this. I believe that there's a nature of people, and I believe that there's something that people are taught. So, and Irene's gonna know about this because I almost always do this every time I'm on the line. Every time I'm on the live, I quote Thomas Jefferson, or mention something that he wrote or spoke on. So he and John Adams had this correspondence that are now called the notes on Jefferson's letters to John Adams or something like that, where essentially it's like 5 months of correspondence between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson in like 1807, where they're basically talking about what's supposed to be in the Constitution and all that other stuff. And Thomas Jefferson says, well, no, I think John Adams brings up the point first, but Thomas Jefferson elaborates on the point. So John Adams brings up the idea that there's a quote unquote natural aristocracy. And this isn't new because I've said this on
hogwash.
Hmm? Wait, what?
I apologize. I apologize, brother, for interrupting you. But
okay.
What John Adams said, or what you quoted that he said, that's complete hogwash. And anything Thomas Jefferson said in reference to the Constitution, how they should navigate with it, it's going to be hogwash because the Constitution they plagiarized from Africans who were the Iroquois. But I'm listening to you because we got to have a conversation.
Well, yeah. So, so what John Adams said was that there's a natural aristocracy amongst men, and that there are people that are essentially born to have a high place in society, and people who are born to admire those people. And everyone sort of has a subconscious hardware towards either one. And that the purpose of government, and this is where the diversion from European government to the American government is supposed to come in, it's not chosen arbitrarily by, you know, a royal caste system, but by the natural inclination for people to follow and the natural inclination for people to lead. And like I said, the theory is that this is in people's innate nature, that they're either followers or leaders.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I have a question, brother, because I understand the premise that you're describing, and it's pretty much. I mean, the quote unquote founding fathers, which they're not my founding fathers, but they outlined this. They outlined this in Manifest Destiny, but the quote unquote natural selection of followers and leaders, um, they were adopting what they were running from, which was the European monarchy, the English monarchy. When they got to America, they understood that monarchies creates jealousy when you're trying to govern a population of people. So they adopted Niccolo Machiavelli's scheme or system of how to govern people. Okay, you got to get the book called The Prince, and you have to study Niccolo Machiavelli, and it's not really hard to do. And what they understood was, first of all, like I said, monarchies create jealousy, quote unquote royalty, king and queen. That creates jealousy when you're trying to control a population of people. That's why they fled Europe. Every single quote unquote founding father was a felon from Europe. They were fleeing felons. This is a fact. George Washington, who was the first quote unquote president, he was a land swindler. He stole all the land he had from Europeans, and that's why they gave him the presidency, because he owned more land than anyone else. But to the point I'm trying to make is this: that pseudo concept of some humans are leaders and followers, that's pseudo, and what they use to characterize a leader and a leader and a follower was first just basically Europeans who had the most money, juxtaposed to Europeans who didn't. And they tried to end that, and they was working that out in the system. But then Baker's rebellion happened because Europeans were indentured service as well as Africans. But Baker's rebellion happened, which was Europeans siding with Africans or Moors, indigenous Americans, and was fighting against them. So then they realized, okay, now we need to classify a race. So that's when they started the whole racial construct of white, black, and that type of thing. But and I'm gonna let you finish because you're hitting on all cylinders. But what you have to understand, brother, is that when your premise is European off top, like if you're quoting Thomas Jefferson and John Adams without quoting before them, like if you quote the Constitution and you do not know about the Iroquois, which is what they stole the concept of the Constitution from, then you're going to be confused.
Well,
because
I'll say this. I'm not gonna dispute a whole different things because I do thoroughly disagree with some of the things that you said.
what was that?
But I think for the sake of having a conversation and the sake of expediency, you can't just, go throughout the entire history of every idea, because everyone feeds off of past ideas. So if I were to go throughout history and find, well, like you mentioned, but Machiavelli, if I were to say Machiavelli says this and Machiavelli says that, then that's getting into teaching people, like college courses and all that other stuff.
But
So,
Niccolo Machiavelli, brother, is what Western political science is based on, from top to bottom. This is not my opinion, brother. This is how they operate right now.
well, yes, but at the same time, I don't think that all of the things that I'm mentioning can be can be traced back to Machiavelli, if that makes any sense. So if I quote something from Thomas Jefferson, I'm not going to have a quote that is as efficient to use in conversation that may be applied to Machiavelli. Because I'll put it like this. It's the difference between a well-known quote from a philosopher versus a 18th century literature textbook. Like, you're not going to quote the entire textbook to try and have a general conversation.
True.
You're going to tell them the quote. Like,
I'm talking about the paradigm, brother dog. I'm talking about the paradigm. We got red and blue, Democrat and Republican, right? A lot of our people think that that's two different factions, but it's not.
Oh, of course.
It's the same thing. And if you study Niccolo Machiavelli and how he's an Italian, how he established as a political diplomat in Italy, and how the forefathers of this country adopted everything, his whole system, it's exactly the same. So it's not, I'm not talking about quotes, I'm talking about a paradigm. This is how they're operating.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll say like this, because I've been on this panel a few times and maybe you haven't heard me. So I'm not going to fault you for not knowing enough about like my personal philosophy to know, how I come to certain conclusions. But, and I was getting to this when I mentioned Thomas Jefferson, because the preface, I was merely prefacing with the natural aristocracy thing, because the natural aristocracy is a subset of natural law. So natural law, and this is something that Thomas Jefferson mentions in, what is it? Oh, which one was it? I think he does mention it in the Declaration of Independence, but I know that he explicitly wrote about it. That's neither here nor there. But natural law is the sort of father of all quote unquote natural things. So essentially what natural law is, the idea that
natural law is a racist ideology.
Not necessarily, because natural law is only the belief that God has a certain God has set principles, and those principles are built into the very foundation, not only of man, but of everything in the universe.
What God?
So it's not, I don't necessarily know how natural law is a racist principle, because like I said, natural law is essentially just the idea that God made Earth, and that Earth has nature, and that therefore all things that men do have some sort of nature that can be understood.
What God? What God?
Well, the God of Abraham. I don't necessarily say, I don't say like, because personally,
just what you said right there ties it to being inherently racist, and it's false. It's completely false. Universal law is based on science. Everything down here, and I apologize if I'm interrupting, brother, but I have to. Just off that right there, the paradigm is shattered, it's false, and anything else is confusion. There is no God of Abraham or none of that. We are in the third dimension that we call Earth, and everything is dictated by frequency, vibration, and lights.
Wait. Don't go philosophical. Don't do it. It's too early in the morning.
I'm not talking about that's science. That's science. That's science.
Can I throw us off track here? Only because I've got to go to bed. But I want you guys to give like your final thoughts, but I do want to just touch on two things before we all like say goodnight. Yes, I agree, Ox. Dark does have a soothing voice. Mister was actually saying while you were talking that you sound like my eldest son. Which I don't think you sound like him, but I think you guys have the same like
resonance.
Yeah. So Whitney Titus, I think, really hit the nail on the head. She said, we are European culturally, though, so we think just like them. And I think we must recognize we are European culturally. And whether people like that or not, we live in a Western nation. We are educated from a Eurocentric standpoint. Our entertainment, everything around us is controlled by Europeans. So we are culturally European. Now, as we get older and people try to assimilate African culture into them and into their lifestyles, and I think that's fine. But at our core, from a young child up, we are reared culturally European. And we have to understand where that indoctrination is so we can think past it. I think recognizing that and understanding it so that you can think past that indoctrination is really important. And then two of the young ladies, Muslim Girl and Olivia, were bringing up the difference between whites and blacks. Now, I think everybody on the panel may have different views on this. I will say for me personally, I don't think skin color, like literally the color of a person's skin, dictates what kind of person they're going to be.
It does, and I can explain
Wait, you can disagree with me, but I'm just saying, when I see a white baby and a black baby, or a light baby and a dark baby, I don't think that there's something innate there that guarantees that those children are going to come up some way. I think that a lot of that is culture. And so when Olivia brought up what happened in Liberia, that is a huge thing I think we have to recognize, is we tend to pattern our behavior and our ideologies off of what Whitney was saying, us being culturally European. So what I mean by that is this idea of dehumanization of other people. Literally, sometimes when I listen to pro-Black people, they sound just like racist white people. They say we have tails, we say they have tails. They say we're not human fully, we say they're not fully human. They say we're animals, we say they're animals. It's like literally the same thing, but with a Black face. So I think a lot of this is cultural. We have adopted a lot of the ways. I would never look at a newborn white baby or newborn Black baby and think I know what person they would become. But I definitely think that culturally speaking, there are differences. And those differences are because there is a different life experience for Blacks and whites. And even if you grow up with the opposite experience, like if a white person grows up solely with Black people, or a Black person grows up solely with white people, society will check your place. Society will let you know where you belong because it's heavily ingrained. So any philosophical conversations we could have about there not being a difference between us become irrelevant in light of how the world works. So theoretically, I would say people are people, theoretically. In practice, there are differences.
Can I just make one comment? Sure. Yes, Sister Irene, and I want to thank you again for allowing me on the panel. And Brother Doc, I appreciate our discourse, and also Brother Mister, and peace to everybody in the chat. And this is what I want to say, and this is brass tacks. Don't take my word for it. Don't believe anything I'm gonna say. Just do the research. There is a scientific difference and a genetic difference between a Caucasian and an African and an Asian or any other race. There's a genetic and a scientific difference. The difference is melanin, neuro and eumelanin. Eumelanin is carbon. It's 6 protons, 6 electrons, 6 neutrons. Asians and Caucasians are RH positive, meaning they, in their DNA genetic strand, they have rhesus monkey blood. Africans do not. Okay? This is not me. I'm not just making this up. I'm not just some pro-black pseudo scholar. This is pure science. You can Google this. With that being said, that does not dictate how a European or Asian is going to live their lives. But what it does do is it makes them more susceptible to low frequency energy from the cosmos that will possess them to do things that are inhumane. Black people, people of melanin descent, or African people, even though our pineal glands are calcified, we are less susceptible to being under a low frequency vibration from the cosmos. In religion, they call it spirits and demons. All it is it's all see, they made it spooky. It's science. Vibration, frequency, light, which translates into magnetism. That's all everything is. White people or whatever race of people who are not 666 positive, 666 positive, but they're RH positive, which is the rhesus monkey, they are more susceptible to being possessed by negative, low vibrational frequencies from the cosmos. That's the difference. We can be possessed, and a lot of us are, because of the food, the diet, and the environment. But that's the inherent difference. We have an inherent genetic difference, and we're diametrically opposed. And this is obvious in the behavior and especially sexuality. It's obvious. This is not pseudoscience. This is real science. This is real facts. So I'm just going to interject that, and don't believe me. Just research it. The panel, research it for yourselves, guys.
I think we should have another conversation on this, only because I don't want to get into it now because it's so early in the morning, only because there are populations of people that are Black that RH factor affects. So that's why I think it would be an interesting conversation, because I feel like that kind of goes down the path of the same kind of path of when we talk about Neanderthal DNA, but there are Black populations with Neanderthal DNA. So
they were mixed.
I'm sorry?
Only if they were mixed.
No, there are Black populations with Neanderthal. And then the question then becomes, then when we talk pure genetic, well, we can't get into that now, but what we should definitely do, because I think we could have a really fascinating conversation on this, is we should definitely do a whole separate live stream just on that topic. Because I think I would love to talk about that, and not even to challenge your points, just to open up a dialogue, because I think a lot of people hear about those things, but they're never fleshed out in a clear and concise conversation. So I think that would be amazing if you want to do that for us to do, because I don't think we can do it. This is too early in the morning, y'all, for us to literally do it justice, do that conversation justice today. But are you down to do that, Five?
Absolutely, no doubt. And I'll do it live, and I'll present screenshots and documentation. I won't just talk. I'll show.
Yeah, that would be dope. I would love that.
I broke it down on my channel, by the way. I got videos breaking it down.
Oh, we'll put your link in the chat.
Thank you. I will do.
Okay. And then, yeah, go ahead. I was trying to get us all to say goodbye, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I wanted to make a little comment.
Okay.
Five, you should probably change your channel name, because it's really hard to find by search. That's the only comment that I have towards it. I tried to search up your name, your YouTube channel, but the way the YouTube algorithm works, it shows like the most views that you like, the most viewed videos in like 24 hours get like the highest user score. So it's like, unless you have like $100,000, I mean, not $1,000, 100,000 subscribers or whatever, if you have like a really common name, your channel isn't going to show up like by search.
Yeah, thank you for that, but I know I need to do that. I just started my channel about 2 months ago, so yeah, I don't have a lot of views, so but thank you though. I'll do that.
Well, hopefully we can get you some views, but you got to put your channel in the chat. Put it in the chat, because there are some people that do want to check out your videos. Did you have was that what you had to say in closing, Five, or did you have something else to say?
That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to just put a bug in our people's ear. That's all.
Thank you, Five. Thank you so much for coming up. You added so much to the conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you. Appreciate it. And I look forward to our conversation on those topics. We have to do it after the 8th, though.
Okay, thank you so much.
I'm pressed right now, but
I'm ecstatic to just be here talking to you guys. I've been following you for about a year now, and I love all your information. I love the chat. I've heard you before, Brother Doc, and you always hit on all cylinders. So I was never really in disagreement with you per se, and Brother Mister and everybody.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation, though, Five. One, because I actually haven't had a conversation with anybody on that topic before, like just not even in life, right? I know about it because I've read like people's opinions on it, but I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. So like genuinely, I'm looking forward to that. Mister, do you have anything to say?